but he wanted to come. He's writing a book on Cook Barracks, and this is the final chapter of it, that he wanted to come and meet us. So I'd like to introduce Mike.
Guten Tag. Ja.
Guten Morgen.
Guten Morgen, meine Herren und Damen. Heute ist ein schöner Tag, ja? Or should I just say, as they would say in southern Germany, Groß gut. So did you learn a few words when you were in Germany?
Ja.
So die.
Ein Bier bitte.
Ein Bier bitte. Noch einmal bitte. Ein Bier. That's for one more beer. I know he didn't just drink one. For me, that was 1957. And I'm, as you said, a little kid coming across on the Upshur just like you. I was part of Operation Gyroscope. I may not have known it at the time, okay? But what I did know was we had some amazing grand adventures on that boat, running around. And you are probably the ones that got rustled up looking for some kid who got lost out there, right, on the ship. That probably was me. Or my little sister, who was a known renegade in doing this. Now, you know, I found out years later that Elvis Presley, when he went into the military, ended up on the Upshur too, a couple of years after we did. But I'd be pretty willing to guarantee that Elvis didn't have half as good a time on that ship as we did, coming across. Now, you know, some of you may remember my father, Major Lyons, and then Colonel Lyons, while you were at Cook Barracks. But I want to tell you, I'm one of his brats. And when I tell you that I'm a brat, I'm proud of the fact that I'm a brat, because I got to live a lifestyle that very few American kids ever get to have. And I got a lot out of that lifestyle. It helped me a lot. And I think probably you would say the same thing of your time in Germany. You know, what you got out of it was probably more than you thought you were going to get. And that was my experience with the military. Now, you know, we're coming across on this boat, and I'm struggling with, what is this thing, Germany? You know, I'd already lived in Japan, already been at Fort Hood, Texas, and Fort Lee. But I knew that the war had ended only 12 years before that. Now, as a brat, we were raised on the lore of World War II. We heard all these stories. See, I know about you guys. I sat around here yesterday, and I'm hearing Army stories. These were not the first Army stories I had ever heard in my life. Are you kidding? I was raised on war stories. It's not just, you know, it's not like you're raised on blood and guts war stories. You're raised on things that happened, strategy, tactics, and mostly humor, and what went wrong. But I'm thinking about Germany, and I'm wondering about, we are about to go into this epicenter. Like, if there was a hot spot in the world at that time, that's where it was. And I'm wondering about that. And I'm thinking about all these Nazis that are there. And I'm this little kid, and I'm looking, and I'm going to figure out that there are all these Nazis running around in Germany, and I'm wondering about that. And we get on this train. Probably got on the same train I did. Come into Bremerhaven, you get on this train, all right? You go down to Stuttgart, and then you make your way over to Göppingen and Cook Barracks. We're riding along on this train. I'm there with my two sisters, okay? And we're looed out the window. And it's been 12 years. There's been a lot of reconstruction. Germany had a lot of things that had been rebuilt. But when that train pulled out of Bremerhaven, you'd see blown up buildings and destruction and stuff that happened in the war. And when you're a little kid and you got your nose pressed up against that window of that train rattling by, all of a sudden, it's not just a story anymore. You start wondering about what this was all about. So, you know, the good major, recognizing that I was perpetually hungry, takes us to the dining car. I remember this waiter coming up. This is a very strack German, very erect, very precise. Had a white cloth draped over his arm. Looks at my father. My father looks at him and says, 2 beers. And the waiter looks at him and says, 2 Bier, mein Herr. My father nods. Did you watch that? Did you watch what I just did? Yeah. Okay? This isn't just a different language. Okay, my father said 2 beers. When he said 2 beers, he didn't have his hands this way. He said 2 Bier. It isn't just that the words were different, the body language is different, the symbolism is different, and I'm thinking to myself, because I'm watching all this, you are not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. And then my father looks at him and says, looking at the 3 of us little rascals, dry Coca-Colas. Guy nods, walks away. My little sister, the rowdy, pipes up and says, dry Cokes? What are dry Cokes? Then my father says, you know, it's just too difficult to explain. You're going to have to experience it for yourself. And my little sister takes a napkin off the thing, a cloth napkin, puts it over her wrist like this, like the waiter, and starts pretending she's pouring out crystallized Coke. And we're laughing and joking about this Coke, and we're wondering what this stuff is. And pretty soon the waiter comes up. He's got this beautiful silver tray, and he sets it down. There's 2 beers on there, and there's 3 Cokes, 3 bottles of Coke. It's regular old Coke. My sister looks at my dad and says, hey, that's American Coke. And he looks at her and laughs and says, yes, those are dry Cokes. Dry means 3 in German. Eins, zwei, drei. I said 3 Cokes, not dry Cokes. We laughed about that for years afterwards, and somebody in my family is still saying, you got any dry Coke? This is how I remember entering the continent of Europe when we came. And I have to tell you, we come to Göppingen, okay? It's been raining, it's whatever. The closer you get into Bavaria, all of a sudden there's snow. And there's snow everywhere. We're in this big staff car and we drive up. You're coming up to the gate, and the MP peeks into the car and he sees that oak leaf cluster on my father's uniform, and he snaps to and waves us in. And we enter in what becomes my little kingdom for the next 3 years. And it's the most amazing place I've seen, okay? I never saw snow that white, trees that green, sky that blue. I mean, it made a Disney movie look like amateurs were making it, all right? This place was unbelievable. At least for a kid, it was like Wonderland. So we called it Wunderland. And we went tearing around Cook Barracks like you can't believe, all right? We had so much freedom. We'd be jumping on our bikes or walking around. We'd go to the snack bar and PX and the movie theater and all the places you went. But the places that we owned most were those woods that were all around that base. I'm sure you know about some of this, but when we're hanging out, all right, there's Nazi bomb shelters around this place. There's old pillboxes there. Those were our forts, all right? During World War II, when the Luftwaffe would train pilots there, they had an anti-aircraft unit there. And they had a whole bunch of anti-aircraft shells that were kind of still hanging out in that woods periodically. Now, there are no smart brats in the world that walk home to their parents and say, "Guess what we found?" Surest way in the world to get cut off from playing in your woods. All right? If our parents knew the half of what we were up to, well, as brats, we had more freedom than any kid in America today. I mean, on our days off, when we weren't in school, from sun up till 1800 hours, all right, for you civilians at 6 o'clock at night. We could do anything we wanted, go anywhere we wanted, roam anywhere we wanted. It was fabulous. Now, by the way, if you were 1 minute late for dinner, you're a dead man. The good major would eat you alive. When I talked to you guys yesterday, you know he had that kill look, okay? He just had that ornery kill look, all right? You did not want to show up late. Now, what happens is, it's so great because as a brat, I had exposure and freedom, but responsibility at the same time. Responsibility that kids would have an interesting time coping with today, all right? You know, when they blow retreat at night, and the flag's going to come down, you're in a brat that doesn't know. You got to get off your bike and stand at attention and put your hand over your heart. Because if you don't, and one of you adults see us doing that, we are in deep yogurt. I'm telling you, we're in trouble. We lived as kids with the threat of what you called a DR. A DR is a delinquency report. I might have known one or two things about that. You know what that means? In today's world. Okay, what happens with kids in today's world? Let me tell you, all right? For sure, if I say, your kid was bad, blah, 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 he didn't stand at attention, he didn't do this, he did that, there is an absolute presumption that children today are innocent and that they couldn't possibly have done anything wrong. Well, let me tell you, when I grew up, according to the good major, not only were you guilty until proven innocent, you were guilty anyway, because you shouldn't have even been accused. You think it's bad that a kid could get accused of something now. You got accused of something then, and a formal letter got put into your father's military jacket, and that letter went to the commander, okay? So it went up to Colonel Beatty, and it ended up at O'Mara. Now, I don't want to tell you that we had a little pressure on us as children, but we were not raised the way lots of kids were raised. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't trade it for anything. We had such a good time. I can't remember whether it was Smitty or Russell or Clyde yesterday who told me this little story. about some troop. They had backed up this huge truck. I don't think it was a deuce and a half. I think it was one of the fuel trucks. Some guy's on top of it. It's backed up right to the fence, right? Mm-hmm. That perimeter fence that went around Guppingen. Mm-hmm. And this brilliant troop rolls over during his nap, falls off the truck, and lands on the opposite side of the perimeter wire in the fence. Now somebody's got to go back, get a Jeep, explain why you're getting a Jeep, what you're doing with the Jeep, go off base, go all the way around, go rescue the little sucker, and bring him back. And I appreciate it. Go through that, rescue that little character, okay? But see, if you'd have talked to us, we could have explained to you how you get over that perimeter fence and how you could have got him back over without getting the Jeep. Because as brats, the one thing we were was very resourceful. Anyway, this was, you know, is it okay if I keep telling you a couple stories?
Yes.
All right. I'm there. And I'm totally preoccupied, as I said, with Nazis, and we're going around Guppingen, and every adult I see, I'm trying to figure out if they're a Nazi or not. Nah. But it took a while. But as I said, brats are fairly resourceful, and all of a sudden, we begin to put two and two together. And the Nazis are a thing of the past. And the reason that you were there, the reason 4th Armored Division was there was that was the shield against 3,000 tanks, Soviet tanks, up on the Iron Curtain that were pointed right at us. And those were not Russians on vacation. The intent was the reunification of Germany, but they weren't planning on the West being the one reunifying things. When you're a little kid and you start to hear about this, see, and adults don't talk about that. We had a bunch of German friends. You know what Germans are not allowed? German kids were not allowed to say one particular word. You know what that word was? Nazi. Not allowed to talk about the war. You know what nobody talked about for brats and us? Communists and those tanks on the border. They thought we were little kids and we shouldn't be worried about that kind of stuff. And no one was talking. Except the other day, or yesterday, we were talking about the exchange rate and how you were doing pretty good with the D-mark and the dollar, and you lived pretty good. Well, must have been doing pretty good because the good major decided to get a nanny for us. My nanny, Ingrid, was 17 years old. And she had come across the Iron Curtain, lived in Dresden, came across the Iron Curtain at 17. And when she came across with no other clothes, no money. Gave up her friends, gave up her family, but she wanted freedom. Ingrid is the one who splained me who the Stasi are, who the KGB is, who the Russians are, and what that kind of world was like. It's then that as a bunch of little brats, I mean, you think we're just little kids. You think we're not putting two and two together. Let me tell you two and two. I vividly remember the day my sisters and I discovered that there were 4 suitcases pre-packed in the back of the closet in our quarters. You know this word, quarters. American kids live in houses or apartments. Military brats live in quarters. All right, so we're in the back of the quarters and there's these 4 suitcases, okay? Well now, if there's 4 suitcases stacked up, any good brat worth his salt has got to do a little recon of this territory. Find out what's in those suitcases. We figured it was going to be Christmas presents hiding in there. No, no, no. It was everything we needed, clothes, stuff, like you were packed to go on a little vacation. Except those suitcases weren't about a vacation. Those suitcases were in the event that Göppingen, that Cook Barracks, got overrun by those Soviet tanks, and we needed to get out of town fast. Those were evac suitcases. Now, you may have been living in the barracks, and you may not have had 4 suitcases in your barracks, okay, or known about that. Oh, you had 1.
Alert bag, we call it.
You had your alert bag. We asked our mom, what are those suitcases for? And she looks at us and says, that's just in case we want to go on vacation quick sometime. I'll tell you, vacation. Parents weren't talking. We were not raised like every American kid in doing this. The other thing is, I vividly remember my father going on maneuvers. So, you know, when you guys would roll at 0400, you'd get up at 1 in the morning and roll by 0400. We're like, what's that about? What's going on? Is there a problem with tanks on the border? So a lot of times this is maneuvers, okay? You're going up there, you know, to do live fire exercises or range scores. We also figured out there's a thing called a red alert, and that had very little to do with mock warfare. It had to do with somebody rattling the saber up on the Iron Curtain, and you needing to marshal your resources and get up there. We little kids started keeping our ear kind of close to that railroad track, trying to figure out, is this a live fire exercise or we got a problem in doing that? And that too was the kind of thing we lived with. We knew they were going to Grafenwehr, okay? Grafenwehr, you gotta love this place. This is where Rommel trained the Panzer Corps when he was gonna go fight in North Africa. 4th Armor didn't have tanks up there on vacation. They were training just the way Rommel did. But they were training to be ready in case those 3,000 tanks got aggressive on the other side of that Iron Curtain. So when we would hear Graf, our antenna would go up in what we're doing. This is not your average life. I had to tell you about the pecking order. I don't know if you know about the pecking order today, okay? Here's the pecking order of how things work in America, at least as I see them, all right? Who is number 1 in the family today? The children. Without a doubt. Children, you know, they got to get them to soccer practice, got to get them here, got to get them there. Who's next in line below the children? The mom. Moms are in charge. That's the next one in charge, down the line. Who's the next one below the mom? The dog. And then somewhere way down the line, there's the dad. I know, I've got 7 children, okay? I know where I stand in the pecking order today. But that is not how I grew up. When we lived at Cook Barracks, when you were there, the pecking order in pole position 1 was the United States Army. And when the Army said jump, you moved. Number 2 was the good major. He didn't even have to talk, he just gave you a look. And below him was my mother. Below my mother was the dog. And we were way down here someplace. I'm getting used to being way down here my whole life, okay? What's a brat? Now, it's not just these little rowdy renegades, okay? Brat, B-R-A-T, stands for British Regimental Attached Traveler. That's how they used to get Brat, because they'd put a little sign on these kids when they were deploying to India or someplace else. Brat, British Regimental Attached Traveler. Are you catching what I'm saying? I was not a humanoid. I was not a person. I was an appendage. I was an attached traveler. Okay? When I say we were down here on the pecking order, it was pretty cool. We were. Life's not the same as it was then. So, that's the backdrop of this book that I've been writing. This book is called Brat and the Kids of Warriors. And it's a fictional novel, all right? But you'd probably recognize a few things in this novel. The setting is Cook Barracks. The year is 1957 to 59, all right? And the Soviet tanks play a role in all of this. This is not just a story about a bunch of brats. This is also your story. I mean, this is the time that you were there and what that's about. Now, the book is designed for middle school kids and up, all right? But it's an adventure story. It's a spy story, all right? Given my nanny Ingrid, we've got to get some spies involved in this story. But it is also the story of all brats from all times. And I think there isn't too much written about brats. But, you know, I'm writing about brats because these brats are really, really important. There are 1.5 million brats on active duty today. Well, some of them are 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, but some of them are older, like we were. And these kids, are tomorrow's leaders. These kids are amazing. They are being raised with exactly the right skill set to become tomorrow's leaders. And I don't just say that like, you know, they have good brains and they're driven and that. There are lots of American kids who are smart and who are driven. But given their lifestyle, okay, they're becoming extremely adaptable. They're really good at dealing with failure and adversity and becoming chameleons in adapting to the worlds around them. The average American kid lives in one town, goes to one set of schools their whole life. I was in 9 schools before I got to high school. So's the average brat. I only showed up on the first day of class once in my life. I was always coming in the middle of the year someplace. But the average American or global is going to have multiple jobs, not 1 or 2 jobs in their lifetime. They're going to have 10 or 15. And I'm not just talking about you're doing the same thing for somebody else. I'm talking about completely different things that you do. Adaptability and your ability to morph is huge. That's why these kids are being raised, and they're going to be somebody. They have exposure, you know, we might have exposure only to English. Well, you have some exposure to Spanish. It doesn't mean you can speak any Spanish. Whereas brats, most of them are raised on 3 and 4 languages. They see the world. These are tomorrow's globals. And these are the kids that I love. So that's why I'm partly trying to tell their story and what that's about. So let me just close with one other thought. I needed somebody to review the military stuff in here. It's been a while since I've been a lieutenant, and I wasn't a tanker when I was a lieutenant. So I needed somebody to review what was going on here. And I had the great good fortune of running across a guy named Brett Sylvia, who's at the Pentagon right now. He's a colonel. And he helped me edit some of this. And one thing about Colonel Sylvia is he reminded me that Napoleon said that an army fights on its stomach, right? Well, that's true, I think, unless you're a tanker. And then it's all based on gasoline. And I'm trying to see where I got this. This is the other thing I picked up yesterday. Not the only thing I picked up yesterday, but where Colonel Beatty said that O'Mara said, okay, we don't care if they starve or if they freeze, but if they run out of gas, you're out of a job. That's logistics. Okay, that's what it's all about. You know, rations, clothing, and gasoline. And that's what helps if you're a tanker. What De Silva said was, in terms of tank and tank warfare, tactics is for amateurs. Logistics is for professionals. Let me say that one more time. Tactics is for amateurs. Logistics is for professionals. What you did when you were in Germany was provide the logistics and the gasoline for the 4th Armored Division. You are what made them professional. And for that, I thank you. And I salute you. Thank you.